Alright, you've got Mike, the Cannabis Kid from Peterborough Hydroponic Centre, and today I'm going to give you a little idea how easy it is to get growing with hydroponics. I'm certainly a distributor for homegrown hydroponics. Hey, they're calling right now. And we've got a great catalog for you that you can always check out with lots of great products and pictures. And for those that don't want to buy a book, hey, we've got a nice little tip section right here labeled propagation. Hey, great area to start. Also has some great tips. It's always an easy thing for everybody to get for free. So great idea to start with that. And a lot of times we also hand out this kind of idea. It's a DNF nutrient chart. It has every product that DNF offers and exactly how to use it and what stage to go with. And it's as simple as this. If we have a meter, such as a tri-meter, we can follow the values to make sure we did everything correctly. So I'm going to show you how to do some cuttings in early stages at the beginning here, but just to give you an idea, if you're following a chart like this, you can certainly, for instance, we've got a nice flowering table here of some nice peppers and some bok choy. And, for example, if we're in mid-stage here, it says we're going to run an EC level of about 2,000. And if we look way over here, it says a pH level of, let's say, 5.8 to 6 kind of range. So this kind of meter here is a lovely tool. I don't know if you can quite see it on the angle there. But we've got it reading in the tank here right now. So we've got two different kinds of probes. This type of thing measures the food level. And it's going to last forever, and this type of probe is going to measure the pH level. Now pH is much more difficult to measure. It's something that is going to need a little ongoing maintenance as far as calibrating the meter, but it's nice to see that we have an pH of 5.9. Our EC value is actually at this is multiplied by 10, so it's at about a 1200. So it's a little bit lower than what we have in this chart right now. This is mentioning that it might go up as high as 2000. So we can match the appropriate ranges. Now keep in mind, most of our sheets are made up for being very productive at home. If I was growing cannabis on this table, which is always our expertise around here, we would certainly be following this chart to a T. When we're growing with less light, for instance, we're using 400 watt lights instead of thousands. We're growing some fairly passive growing product here, so we might run a slightly less than what's on this chart. But it's certainly a great guide, no problem following exactly for pretty much any kind of variety, especially cannabis. I would just simply follow the chart and to a T. So this kind of thing is very, homegrown, has been around for 25 years. So we've certainly got some proven success with this kind of product, and no sense in inventing the wheel yourself. You might as well just watch how everybody else is spinning the wheel and try to be, successful like as everyone else. So at the early stage, most people come into the store and wonder how to get started. Maybe they've already got some cuttings or some small plants in mind. So most of the time, if we have some stock plants and we're going to take a cutting, so a suitable top with some nice foliage coming out of there, we can take a nice cut at a good V point in the plant. We can certainly take that, put it in a glass of water, such as what I have right here. We're going to take one more cut of that cutting underwater, so that if it is going to get anything in that open wound or that joint, it's going to be water. And then from that point, we're going to put it into a rooting hormone and into a medium. So I'm kind of jumping ahead. Now, we always have to think about mediums. Most people come in and say, I'm familiar with growing with soil, and there's really no problem with sticking with what you're familiar with. This type of tray is a common Jiffy 7 product. We're going to use expandable peat pellets. We can put all our solution in a tray and let the solution be absorbed by the little Jiffy puck in about half an hour, so they'll swell up and absorb that nutrient, and we can certainly plant right into Jiffy pucks. Now I'll come back to these in a second. Another popular choice is always rock wool. Now rock wool comes in many different forms. A lot of people are a little confused to how to use rock wool. It comes in many different shapes and forms. We generally are starting with either a a plug that has a slice in the side so we can open it up and put the cutting together, or we can use individually wrapped flats, blocks that are great if you're just using a few of them, and they're so easy to use. Or probably the most popular product is really a full flat. Now a flat contains 98. Certainly if you're just going to do 20 cuttings or something like that, I'd suggest you to slice off 20 to use. Now this kind of thing does take a couple steps before you use it. We basically need to soak it to get it wet and rinse it with a solution that has the correct pH. So it's not really quite suitable to use just tap water. We're going to adjust the pH ever so slightly, and certainly we can sample the medium itself. Come on in, Joyce. I'm just going to grab a cube so that So any of these Rockwool products will simply plug into a larger size of block. We can also get into solid cubes, but most of the time what I'm suggesting is we take a cutting, we place it into the next size of block. These can be hand watered, they can be done with an automated system such as we have on the table. But when we get into an automated type system, I really love to see nice tall amounts of Rockwool. Whether you want to stack cubes or buy taller cubes, that's great. But the idea is if we increase the height of the vertical water column, it will force the water to the bottom, so the top cube will seem quite dry and the bottom will be more moist. This kind of gives us a bigger leeway of when to water things. I always love the term willy-nilly. If you have it nice drainable cubes, you can water them willy-nilly, but make sure they don't run out of water. When we're dealing with Rockwool, we're always looking at a point of, not really saturated if it was a complete block of water with the sense of having the cube, but we never want to run them right out of water like we might with soil. Soil is a lovely concept where we're going to go wet to dry, wet to bone dry kind of thing, but Rockwool, we never want to quite get to that point. If we're looking at a table like this, we certainly have them in containers, but down in amongst this container, you can see the Rockwool cubes that it's really growing in. So cubes themselves, they're made of stone and stone fiber, so if I'm constantly picking these up, you'll probably find that they're getting kind of broken down over a period of time, and it may seem smaller and smaller. So after we're ready, it's really only one transplant, so why not put it in a container of some sort if you're going to handle it, and maybe surround it with a little bit of clay pellet just to prevent it from being any kind of tippy container. But the gist of the growing purpose is really in the Rockwool itself. So in this case, we've got a spike in the top. I'm using a reservoir down below, and it's on a timer. So this type of thing is going to pump up and recirculate through the medium itself. And surely to goodness, if it went around enough times, and I'm going to say, hey, no problem turning it on for 3 hours. It's only a setting on a timer. It doesn't really cost you any more effort. So, let's say a big 3-hour watering, I would probably come back around to my meter and see what the value is in the tank. Now, the tank can always, be a little bit different than a medium up top. So if you were to come along at some point and you're wondering what to do, I would say, hey, why don't we take a sample of the Rockwool? Now this spike isn't running right now, so it'd be a prime time. We can take what we call a Rockwool syringe, which isn't anything too special except our little hose here. And we're going to stick this right into the Rockwool. And it doesn't matter where, what plant really, but we're going to try to draw some water up into the syringe. Now if you don't get enough the first time, no big deal. You could take it from 3-4 plants, that doesn't matter to me. But we're going to try to draw that water up. And now we have a little bit of sample water. So whether it's really in this cutting stage at clones or whether it was a large plant, you can always sample the actual value that is in Rockwool and check it. Now, my favorite situation is using these meters. Now, we can simply shoot the water into the cup. And now, let's start with a pH value and see if that's the same. Now, this system runs pretty commonly around here, so it doesn't surprise me that the value is, well, it looks like it's exactly the same. Okay. So that is all good. If things weren't the same, there's really no harm in scooping out a large volume of water and manually flushing it. Turning on this type of system and letting it run would do a very similar thing. So one way or another, we're going to make sure that the values in the medium are correct. So we're going to take it back a step again. We're going to start with our 1-inch flat. Now, in order to use this material, I might just fill up this tray with water and let it soak. Then I always like it if I can put it in a tray, maybe something like this setup, where I have a lattice tray and a solid tray. So again, I could fill this up with water. I could put my rock wool in the lattice tray and let it soak. Once it's been soaking, and I recommend about 4 hours, we'll pull this out and certainly drain that excess drain water. Now, the next step is I would make sure that I have the correct nutrient solution. So certainly referring to your DNF chart to make sure you have the right values. But I'd like to mix up a solution that has a pH of about mid-5 range. With rock wool, the game is always in this pH of 5. So when we're not working them too hard or cloning young stages, having that high 5 range is more than suitable. pH is something that gets stronger by the power of 10. So certainly it's likely to rise over time. So when we're dealing with our rock wool, we want to make sure we start off with this low enough pH. And the game is kind of like as if we were driving a car and looking at a tachometer on our dash. If we don't push the pH down very far, we're not pushing the throttle pedal very hard at all, and we're not likely accessing the food very easily or getting much energy going on. If we push the throttle pedal down too far, obviously the engine will work so hard and rev up so much that eventually it would blow up the engine, and we're into this kind of rebuild stage. So lots of damage if we go too low with this pH range. So really, we have this whole 5 range to play with. And of course, it gets stronger by the power of 10. So if you were at a pH of 5.5 and I'm at a pH of 6.5, that 5.5 is 10 times stronger. So despite the little numbers, it's changing quite a bit. So what I recommend is practice mixing up a bucket of water. Leave it maybe even overnight or a few hours and recheck that pH. Make sure you have this quick recipe, and you can do it very painlessly, but you're going to be accurate with the pH value. So once you have a solution that is, a trustworthy pH value, you can simply pour it right through the rock wool, letting all the excess product drain to waste. Now, at any point, just like we did with our original rock wool in our containers, we can tip this medium up, trap some water coming out the bottom, and test the pH of that. If it's not correct, certainly just flush it with more solution that is correct. So again, the beauty of rock wool is we can always sample, test, and change those values to make sure we're going to have complete success every time. The other nice part about rock wool, really, in a flat like this, I usually say it's nice so you can treat the whole thing just as if it's one cutting or one project, as opposed to when we're dealing with individual peat pucks or soil pucks. You're going to find that each little container is kind of its own garden itself. So it's very difficult to get a larger number of soil cuttings to really work out exactly the same. They do work great, no, don't get me wrong, but this kind of rock wool medium is something that you can ensure you'll have the same type of success every single time, and it's very easy to deal with. So again, when we come back to our Jiffy product in comparison to soil, I just like to stress that this kind of product needs to go wet to dry, and we have no real method of checking the pH once it's in the medium. So usually what I suggest when we deal with peat moss is that we use a pH of about 6.5 to 7, and I stress it doesn't really matter too much what we start off with as long as it is the same. So if you're using well water or different sources of water, I highly recommend you do a recipe with that kind of water and get a pH of about 6.5 to 7 and just make sure it's the same every time. So if you have the same pH water with our peat moss, you can get into a rhythm where we water the peat moss until it is as wet as it can hold, not sitting in a puddle of water, and then we simply let it dry. Now this kind of thing, if you can keep that watering rhythm in about half a week, so they're going wet to dry in no longer than a half a week, that will give us a good rolling pH in the soil. So the main difference between these two mediums, just to think about it, is rock wool mediums themselves are going to be, we consider this an inert medium, as opposed to our peat pucks or anything that we call soil. We're going to consider that an acidic medium. So when we deal with the two of these, rock wool we put in at the exact pH we'd like, and over time it's likely to rise up out of range. So if this medium is evaporating very quickly, and both of these, any of these products should be really sitting on a heat mat so that they're exactly the right temperature all the time, but we would like both of these mediums to dry up in a fairly quick period of time. Again, I'll come back to the peat moss saying it's nice if it goes about a half a week type of rhythm. And I'm going to tell you rock wool, it's nice if it almost the faster it dries up. If it's evaporating very quickly, I'll tell you the game is really just replenishing it with the same solution that you mixed up originally. So wet to dry fairly quickly with rock wool. It's not uncommon in here to have someone come in and say, hey, my rock wool stays wet for a week. Obviously it's not in a very suitable environment. We certainly would love a heat mat underneath it to make it evaporate very quickly. Maybe it also should be in a room that has good airflow so that the room is not humid itself. Cuttings would enjoy about 85% humidity. Doesn't mean we want to grow in a room that is 85%. It really means we need a room that's about 50% humidity, and we can put a dome over top of this type of thing and increase the humidity just in this chamber itself. But you'll find if the whole room is very humid, it makes it very difficult to evaporate any water. So it's very easy to throw a dome on top and slowly take it off more periods each day until maybe it's off in about a week. But certainly that that first 7 to 10 days, it's nice if the cuttings are in a higher humidity environment. And certainly, let's say a week or 10 days after that, you might be able to grow without a dome. So it's just at that young stage where we're going to want to increase that humidity slightly. Certainly if they don't have any roots, they can't lose their water too quickly. Once they do produce a root, we want to introduce them back down to that lower humidity zone. That lower humidity in rooms will keep plants shorter, will make the mediums dry out more quickly. Of course, there's a tolerance range we have to deal with, but it's nice to have about 50% humidity in these grow rooms. So that's not a humid room. Okay. So most of the time we get questions about what to use when we're doing this cutting stage. Now, if we're going to use rock wool, we're going to put all our magic products into a rinse solution so that it stays in the rock wool when we're finished. If we're going to use the peat pucks, we're going to put it in the original soaking solution. So it's nice to get a nutrient solution prepared if you're going to prep your rock wool or do prep your peat moss or jiffy pucks. So it's we have quite a range of products that can be used at this stage. The basis of everything really is using some kind of food. Now a seed really has enough food within the seed to last, let's say, a few days. So when you first put a seed into a medium, it really doesn't need any food at all. A cutting is a little different story. It's already an established plant, so I would suggest we use food right away. We sell about 8 different product lines of nutrient, but this one is the good old Dutch nutrient formula, an A and a B grow. So the simple setup with this kind of product is whatever you use out of the A bottle, we need to use the same amount out of the B bottle. So of course we're going to refer back to our DNF nutrient chart, and this kind of product when we first start is going to be about 1.25 milliliters per liter of water. So it sounds like a difficult calculation, but why wouldn't we mix up, let's say, 10 liters at a time? So 12.5 milliliters of A, 12.5 milliliters of B into that 10 liters of water, and you can simply adjust your pH and away you go. Now, lots of times I do recommend at this stage that there's lots of helpful products. A couple things I really love is let's say Voodoo Juice. This is a newer product that is a living fungus product, so we can inoculate the medium, let's say once or twice at the beginning, and this product is going to grow along with the plant, along with the root as an extension of the root, and it will help to break down complex foods and allow the plant to absorb them. So great concepts that, let's say give us bigger roots and faster roots with better success rates. Now, Voodoo Juice is a living component. Here's another one that is very similar. This is an enzyme product. Now, the first one I showed you is a living component that produces this type of enzyme. So you can go either direction. This type of thing we would use repetitively. So it's not something that could ever die because it's not a living component. It's very compatible also even with hydrogen peroxide. But what it does, again, the enzyme is going to break down these complex foods and allow the plant to absorb them. So these kind of things aren't real inexpensive, but the beauty of them is at this early stage you're really not likely to use such a high volume of water, so you might find that it does just what it says, bigger roots and faster roots, so it might be a great investment. Now, another thing we are going to need is some kind of rooting hormone. So the first couple of products I showed you, they might go in our rinse solution. So we prepped our rock wool with it. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a glass of water. We're going to use some kind of scalpel. We're going to take a cutting from our plant. We're going to take a second cut from that stem underwater. We're going to place it in some kind of rooting hormone and then directly into our mediums. Now, lots of rooting hormones around this place. Certainly DNF Roots is one of the newer ones that's out. Great product, great price. Root Tech has always been another real popular one. Either one would be my choice for sure. But what we're going to do is simply put the stem in this kind of product. You get a nice little wad on the bottom, probably 3/4 of an inch high, and directly into our rooting mediums. Now, so we go right from a rooting hormone right into our rock wool itself. Now I'd like to see the stem get pushed down nicely, nice tight fit, and we don't want to break the stem or have it loose in there, but I'd like to see it pushed down about 3/4 of the way into our rock wool medium and have a nice cozy fit. Now, if everything's set up nicely and we fill our medium with clones, we should put the dome on it and put some type of light over top. Now I'm just going to grab a light. This kind of thing is this is a Sunmaster kit. Now this is something that's $38.95, so it's a great price with a reflector and a tube. I would probably prefer 2 of them over something like that. Just 2 will always make them kind of stand up and grow straight, so they're not growing into the lights. But this type of thing is a fairly low power, 6400K a lamp, so it's a very wonderful color spectrum for growing this young stage. Lots of heavy blue color spectrum. It looks very white to our eyes, but it's low powered, low heat, and terrific color. So this young cutting stage, we can kind of get as close as we would like with this type of fluorescent. Now we sell them in multiple bank fixtures or strip fixtures like this, but this type of technology is really all we need to get them up and started. We can grow a nice little plant with these types of lights, and it gives us a good start. Now you might put this in a in a closet, as long as it had a fan in there, or some kind of room where the environment is nicely under control. Now rock wool at any time, if we had it in a tray or individual, whether there's plants in it or not, we can always remember we can tip up the medium or sample the actual solution within the rock wool and make sure it's correct. And if it's not, we're simply going to mix up something that is more suitable and flush this rock wool in order to make it correct. But rock wool is something that once you realize how easy it is to use, you'll just love the convenience that you can sample and check and change it if you need to. So we're not going to wait and watch the cuttings kind of fade away. If you want to do something and be proactive, then we're going to sample the actual medium itself before the plant looks tough at all. So lighting is always a funny one. We're at a good spot here. We're at the store where I can show you a few different lights. Now, like I said, these sun blasters, they come in many different setups. The tube design can be put in a compact fluorescent with coils or a bunch of them put together, or full fixtures. But the technology is the same, and most of the time we're going to push this high Kelvin type lighting for younger stages. So behind me here we have a good quality Sunmaster Cool Deluxe lamp running from an electronic ballast, and you can see that the light looks very white on my hand. It is quite bright. It's running in a Cooltube, so this particular one has a fan over here that's blowing through the fixture. So this type of thing is extremely cool. Like, I can put my hand right on that. It's not even hot. So plants can obviously grow right close to it without burning. But this metal halide is about a 5,000 Kelvin color, so it's very similar to this. But I would always say, you know, if I was doing cuttings, I'd probably still do them under a fluorescent, and once they got rooted and started to gain height or become growing aggressively, I would likely quickly get them under this metal halide type color. So this type of fluorescent and our good quality metal halides. Metal halides are they come in a range of colors and qualities, so it is important to make sure you know which one you're purchasing. But certainly we can get metal halides to be very similar in color as our good quality fluorescents. Certainly they're much brighter. Now beside us is a good example of a high pressure sodium. These are very, very popular flowering lights, especially in the cannabis world. Probably your best bang for your buck as far as total amount of light being broadcasted. Now this type of thing, you can see on my hand that it is exceptionally red-yellow. That's as close as I can get. This is an open fixture, so it is a open lamp that is quite hot. That's about as warm as I could close